Coming up on the Long Island Business Report, one of the island's most pressing concerns is the high cost of housing. Can anything be done to make it more affordable and accessible?
When you have a fair market rent for a two-bedroom around $1,680, it's extremely high. When you look at what people are earning as a median salary to start out with in the 40s, and that's high, people can't afford a legal rental right now on Long Island.
We explore the trends and dynamics impacting homeowners on Long Island today and looking into the future.
I honestly see a suburb that is aging. It needs to reinvent itself. We have to be innovative in our thinking, or we will not stop the trend of young people leaving Long Island.
It's all ahead on this edition of the Long Island Business Report.
Funding for this program has been made possible by Charlotte and David Eckert and the Roush Foundation. And now, from Molloy College at the Madison Theater, here's Jim Paymar with the Long Island Business Report.
Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Jim Paymar with the Long Island Business Report. One of the toughest issues facing Long Island today is its housing market. A recent survey by the Long Island Index indicates that almost 50% of residents are somewhat or very likely to leave the island because of the high housing costs here. Joining me to speak about the critical importance of affordable housing is Marianne Garvin. She is the president and CEO of the Community Development Corporation of Long Island, which is a certified housing agency supporting homeowners and small businesses alike. And Peter Elkowitz is also with us. He is the president and CEO of the Long Island Housing Partnership, which provides affordable housing opportunities on Long Island. Thank you both for being with us today. I've been hearing about affordable housing issues since I came to Long Island 30 years ago, and it seems to even be getting worse today. Our young people are leaving. It's becoming more and more costly all the time to live here. What is the situation? When you have to look at the big picture, Marianne, what do you see out there?
Well, I honestly see a suburb that is aging. It needs to reinvent itself. We have to be innovative in our thinking, or we will not stop the trend of young people leaving Long Island. Young people need to feel like this is a place where they can put their roots down, raise a family, have a good job, and that is something that Peter and I have dedicated our careers to doing, and housing is probably the most critical part of that.
And Peter, how do we turn it around? How do we change the thought process, the mindset? How do we redevelop Long Island? Because we were the first suburban community, really, but we have to change now. That was a long time ago after World War II that they built Levittown.
I think we have to start rethinking about our housing stock and the type of housing stock that we have out there. Since we're an aging suburban area, we need to look at rehabbing some of the existing homes and turning them over for new families to come in. But while we turn them over, we also have to look at some of our elderly persons who want to remain here on Long Island and provide them with housing that's affordable. They can't afford the high taxes that are here. We also have to look at the people who are employed or unemployed or underemployed at this point, and what can they really afford in affordable housing. And we need various types of housing, from rental housing to multifamily rental housing to single-family rental housing to home ownership, to even continue with some of the step-up housing with the backyards. But again, if we're going to attract our young, they're going to want a different type of housing than the families that are starting out versus the families that are living in their homes versus the senior population. So I think we need to change that.
Affordable housing, just the word alone, does it have a stigma to it, Marianne? Do people think like, oh, affordable housing coming into my area, I don't know if this is a good idea or not? Do you get a lot of resistance and pushback?
I think we historically have had kind of suspicion about that. I think that's changing now in communities because folks that have young children that now are looking to branch out on their own are finding it difficult to find a rental or a home to own that is affordable to them. And so, for example, CDC is developing a blighted parcel in Quorum, and we're taking down a movie theater that has been vacant for 10 years and building a mixed-use community there. And so very, very important to go to the local community, the local civic association, and have a conversation with them when you're contemplating that kind of development. And I was pleasantly surprised that after the first presentation to this group, they stood up and gave a standing ovation, basically, because they saw two things. One, they want to remove the blight in their community, and number two, their own children can't afford to live here. And so rental housing is important for young people first starting out, and home ownership opportunities are important when people want to have a family and have children. So I think the tide is changing a little bit. I think the nomenclature has to change with it, talking about next generation housing or just housing for young people, housing for seniors, and not, you know, really leading with we're developing affordable housing.
Right. The type of affordable housing that we're talking about, there are a couple of projects that you've been involved with, Peter, Cortlandt Square in Bayshore and Copper Beach out in Patchogue. And these are, from what I saw, it looked like they are very attractive projects. Are they all attractive, or are they all, some of them maybe not built so well so that they look shoddy in 10 or 20 years?
Well, I think that has really changed over the years. I've been working for the Long Island Housing Partnership for about 25 years, and as Marianne just mentioned, that the who is getting into the homes, our children, our parents, you know, our friends and family who live in the community. Now, I think the look of affordable housing, unfortunately, was tarnished originally by those high-rise buildings that we called projects in the Bronx and in Chicago and all, and people have a misnomer about what affordable housing looks like. So when you look at a place like Cortlandt Square in Bayshore, or you look at a place like Copper Beach in Village of Patchogue, it's not what you would imagine to be affordable housing. And one of the reasons is because we bring in the community right away to help design it. We're not going to determine what that community needs or would like to see, and that's why I think Marianne was just reaching out saying about her Quorum development, the same thing. And you'd be quite surprised that the people who you think may be in opposition are actually strongly supporting your development as it moves forward, because you're building into what their needs are.
Marianne, where is the pot of money coming from these days? I mean,
That's
money
a good question. You know, it's very difficult sometimes to get the approvals that you need, the zoning approvals, but getting the financing is the ultimate key.
Yeah, of course.
And I have to tell you that there are investors who see that there's a dramatic demand for rental housing. And so they will come in and make capital available. Our financial institutions are interested in developing housing with us, and our governmental partners, whether it's the local county government, the state government, the federal government, they will give subsidy to leverage the private investment. And so it depends. You know that you have a good project if these resources are coming to you. And that really is what happens if you are building what is needed. And right now, what is needed is more rental housing on Long Island.
Rents have gone up, though, significantly on Long Island. I mean, they're up, what, 39%?
Well, I think you have 2 points that you have to really mention. One is that our housing stock, our full housing stock, only consists of around 20% rental units, okay? And obviously we have a lot of illegal rentals out there because there's not those legal rentals that are out there. And the second issue that you have to really address is the affordability. When you have a fair market rent for a 2-bedroom around $1,680, it's extremely high. When you look at what people are earning as the median salary to start out with in the 40s, and that's high, people can't afford a legal rental right now on Long Island. When
you mentioned 20% of our housing stock is rentals, so how does that compare with most other major metropolitan areas? Most
other areas, especially in Westchester, et cetera, are in the high 30s, the low 40s. So, you know, we almost have to really work to catch up all right, and provide that housing stock.
What about a couple of things that have been going on in the economy? Number one, we got hit very badly by Superstorm Sandy, and that's taken a lot of housing stock away from us. And the other thing is the foreclosure situation that we have here. How does that all play into the mix?
You know, we're in a really critical time on Long Island. For several years, we've had really a foreclosure crisis, and most of the sales that we've had, or the increasing sales, are sales of foreclosed properties. And the regular housing market has been in a decline. So there have been fewer sales in the regular part of the market. How are we going to recover from this? We have to clear out these foreclosed properties. And I think it takes about 3 years for a bank to do a foreclosure, because we're a judicial state, and it takes a very, very long time.
It's New York.
It's New York. It's New York. And but I think we're going to be getting to that point. And to Peter's point about 80% of the housing stock is single family, that is how we developed. We developed as a bedroom community of New York City. And I don't think we are trying to change the single family nature of our homes. We want to add rental housing and multifamily housing. And we have an opportunity to do that because there are many properties in our aging downtowns, blighted commercial properties, properties that have gone into foreclosure that can be purchased and redeveloped in a very healthy manner to add more balance to our housing stock. As far as Superstorm Sandy, a lot of housing has been damaged, but it's going to be rebuilt, and there's going to be money for that. There already is insurance money coming in and FEMA money coming in, and I believe we're going to have some community development block grant funds coming from the federal government, and so we can rebuild that housing stock.
So kind of a silver lining.
It is
really.
a silver lining, I believe.
Yeah,
Putting people back to work, that obviously helps in their affordability of homes.
So with Superstorm Sandy, we basically got some private funds and foundations in to help people replace their heating systems and their hot water systems, which is moving forward as well. So we're getting those families back in hopefully sooner than later. And as Marianne said, you know, rehabbing the existing homes that were damaged during the storm. As far as foreclosure, though, I'd like to address one issue that's really pertinent here, and that is if we don't look at our tax structure, because if you look at the people that go into foreclosure, and most of them are going in because they're either unemployed or underemployed. And if they're underemployed, it's still the same issue, but they have some income coming in. With our foreclosure counsels and with Marianne's foreclosure counsels, if you even reduce the principal and interest down to zero, most people can't even afford the taxes and insurance as part of the housing expense. And you know, the general rule of thumb is about 30% of your income should go towards your housing expense. They're looking even go up to 35. But when you look at the percentages that people are really paying, a lot are paying over 50% of their income towards the housing expense. So it's very difficult for the families that we have that are going through default and foreclosure when we don't have the housing type to move them into, the rental homes to move them into. So they're looking at either doubling or tripling up with family members, or they're looking to live with friends, or they're living in illegal rentals because there's not enough legal rentals. And especially if you're a family, try to find a 3-bedroom affordable rental these days.
Right. I think part of the problem with our housing stock and the market situation right now is during the go-go years, people got into houses that they really couldn't afford because there were these exotic mortgage products. Right now, the pendulum has swung in the complete opposite direction, and credit has tightened to such a degree that to get the best interest rate, you have to put 20% down. And so it's making it more difficult to enter the housing market, more like it was 20 or 30 years ago. And to some extent, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's really important for young people to come in and get pre-purchase homebuyer education and to look at their credit and to save for a down payment. For a first-time buyer, you can use some of the governmental housing programs where you put 3 to 5% down and you can get into a home. Doing it right, getting into a home and buying a home that you can afford will
over the long term.
Over the long term.
Right.
And I think housing prices have come down quite a bit. It's still beyond the reach of many people that are below 80% of the median income, and so...
And interest rates are dirt cheap right now.
They really are. So that kind of counterbalances some of our high property taxes.
Right.
So we are finding people are a little cautious about getting into the market, but because rents are so high and because most of our housing stock is single family, it's still a really good option for young people if they want to make a commitment to stay on Long Island.
I found an interesting article in the New York Times, Peter, it was a couple of weeks ago, talking about REITs, real estate investment trusts, that are accumulating massive sums of money, and they are buying up foreclosed properties, including here on Long Island. Is that a good thing? Does that say to Long Island, hey, this housing stock is still worth something? We expect it to be going in the other direction?
The housing stock is definitely worth something on Long Island, because we even see in running the neighborhood stabilization programs, the federal programs, to buy up properties was difficult because we were in competition with the private sector. We had investors coming in, some of them buying up 1 or 2 properties and then renting them out to 3 or 4 families, which made the numbers work for them. But there is definitely we live on an island, so we have limited land. So obviously we're 60 minutes at max, most places from the city, if not shorter, maybe a little bit longer as further out east you go. But the bottom line is it's a very attractive area, all right? And we have to look at, as well, what is going to be our future employment here on Long Island. And, we had this issue many years ago when the aviation industry
had left,
exactly. So we need to continue to look at that. So I don't think it's just, it's a housing issue, but we also have to look at the employment issue, as well as the tax issue, and it's a very attractive place for people to continue.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have all of these issues, and they all kind of play on each other.
They really do.
But so how do we come up with solutions? And we have so many jurisdictions on Long Island between Suffolk and Nassau County, and like 300 villages and hamlets and towns and whatever. How do we overcome that? How do we start working together to build the next generation suburb?
Well, I think the Regional Council, the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council, that's part of the statewide structure that Governor Cuomo put together, is a really good thing for Long Island. It has brought together stakeholders in all areas, governmental, business, and we are talking to each other for the first time across issues like employment, like schools and job training, and high-tech industry. So we are collaborating, and the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council is making investments and trying to direct investments so that we can have some high-paying jobs, because that's the flip side of the housing market and the situation. We want people to stay here. We want them to have really good paying jobs, so we have to stimulate that part of the economy. We have Accelerate Long Island, which is trying to take ideas that come out of the education system and make them into a real business idea. And so I think we have some coordination going on Long Island. We need more of it.
And from a national point, the Long Island Housing Partnership is working with Cornerstone, an organization looking at standardizing how affordable housing is done across multiple jurisdictions to try to come to some suggested practices that could be used, as opposed to reinventing the wheel and having those little pocket communities throughout, that we could set by example some of the communities have done in other places, for example, including transportation in downtown areas, including increasing density in some downtown areas while keeping the integrity of the single family home for the families at Long Island.
What about private developers, getting them more involved? I mean, affordable housing can be a component of larger projects. We've seen that all across the country. Is that going on Long Island?
I think that it really is. I think developers are seeing that the Long Island market is a strong market. There is a lot of demand. And what's needed is that fertile ground of the local municipalities who have the ability to do the rezoning and make the land approvals. And so that's where really the Long Island Housing Partnership and CDC come in, because we're on the ground, we're in the communities, having that dialogue and trying to make that introduction between the development community and the governmental and the civic groups.
Right.
And a lot of communities, a lot of municipalities have some form of inclusionary zoning, which is to basically, in most cases, they increase the density allowed as long as the private developers building affordable housing. And Marianne's organization, as well as the Long Island Housing Partnership, can bring in some additional subsidies to make them affordable. But the bottom line is the private developer is very much getting involved. I don't think we could compete for the land prices, and if you increase the density, obviously you can spread the soft cost of the land acquisition over more units. It makes it more affordable for us at the end of the day, less dependent on subsidy. And
I think we need really a range of housing opportunities for people. So it's not just housing that's affordable to people at below 50% or below 80% or at the median income. We need it at all ranges. And so in Avalon Bay, for example, that's doing luxury rental housing, there's a market for that.
Right.
So a healthy housing market has all types of product for people.
And it really does tie into something that you mentioned earlier. I mean, if we have good paying jobs here, that's going to push this entire housing scenario into a positive realm. Isn't that the bottom line?
That really is.
You get the cash coming in, you get taxes coming in, you don't have the foreclosure, you've got people working.
That's correct, but I would also warn against that. What you don't want also to happen is for those jobs that pay less, that we still need on Long Island, all right? We want them to be here as well and be able to afford housing, and that goes back to the different types of housing that are required, and make sure they're affordable. I mean, a rental for 2-bedroom at $1,600 is not affordable to a working family. They will never save to become a homeowner, and there's some people that may never want to be a homeowner, and we understand that, or may always want to be a renter, but we have to provide them that option. It's really not up for us to say what they should have, but they should have that option available to them.
In the optimum world, Marianne, what would you like to see happen going forward, let's say the next 5 years? How would you like to see Washington and Albany and Mineola and come together and work together in some way to build affordable housing for the community?
Well, I'd like to have a recognition that we do have a huge number of single-family homes, and there has to be some investment in those homes so that we bring them up to a different level of code and make them more energy efficient. That's really very, very important. But then that we should look at the nexus of transportation and housing. Transportation-oriented development where you have a development near trains, near bus lines, and that we are focusing on that is really critical because less dependence on cars. Young people like to be in a downtown area where there's a lot going on and it's a walkable kind of community. And so we need to do development, and I think that's starting to happen more and more. In Patchogue, there's that kind of development. The Ronkonkoma train station and the airport. There's been a tremendous collaboration between the town of Brookhaven and the town of Islip, and that's been a priority project for the regional council. So that kind of development I would like to see more of.
And what about redevelopment? Because there are large swaths of land around Long Island that really could be redeveloped.
Like the Nassau Hub, for example.
Yes, it's been sitting empty.
There's perfect examples, and as Marianne said, as the partnership has gone, Long Island Housing Partnership has gone in downtown areas, Patchogue, for example, we had to acquire the properties with a private developer and take down the existing structures that were there and redevelop that property. But again, near the train station, as you were talking about a moment ago, Marianne. Also in Bayshore, the same thing. We acquired over 39 properties to do one of our developments right across the street from a train station. It's more expensive, but it's doable, and it's something that we need for the future.
And that kind of development actually feeds on itself so that you have private investment coming in next. So that initial investment needs to be a public investment to give the private developers and that private dollars a sense that, oh yeah, this community is on the uptick.
Bottom line, are you folks optimistic about the future?
I am very optimistic about Long Island.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great place to be.
So we're going to resolve and solve some of these problems and issues.
I would say that we can't look at one solution. We have to look at many solutions to resolve the problems that are out there now, but they can be resolved.
And I think there's political will. There's
Finally.
probably I believe that there really is, more than at any time in my career that I've been doing this work, especially in the communities. I mean, people really understand that this hits them and that it's in their best interest to support good redevelopment of Long Island.
And that we're all in this together.
Yes.
Listen, we will have you back again. This was a great conversation. We're just getting started, and we'd like to go out in the community with you and take a look at some of the things that are going on. And it's been great to have you here.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
And that wraps it up, our conversation about affordable housing on Long Island. Thank you, Marianne Garvin and Peter Elkowitz, for your insights on this important issue, which affects not only those who already own homes on Long Island, but future generations of homeowners to come. For more on the Long Island Business Report, log on to our website. You can also find us on Facebook and join the conversation on Twitter. I'm Jim Paymar. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Long Island Business Report, and we'll see you next time.
Funding for this program was made possible by Charlotte and David Eckert and the Roush Foundation.